Thanks for joining us on Arirang News. I'm Kim Dami in Seoul. President Yoon in his briefing to the nation vowed to dive deeper into the livelihood of the people in the next 3 years of his term, so that there are more tangible changes to people's everyday lives. South Korea's fiscal deficit secured an all-time high in the first 3 months of 2024 on the back of robust chip exports and rising expenditure aimed at shoring up an economic recovery. U.S. President Joe Biden says his country will not supply bombs and artillery shells that Israel can use to conduct a full-scale offensive on Rafah, a comment that was made after confirming a delay in ammunition shipments to Israel. President Yoon for the first time in 21 months, stood in front of the media for a press conference. It wrapped up just moments ago at Yongsan Presidential Office, and we have our Kim Do-yeon on the line to give us the rundown. Do-yeon, what were some key takeaways?
Tommy, as you said, the press conference wrapped up just minutes ago, and it started off with an address at President Yoon's office, which lasted for a little more than 20 minutes before he moved down to the briefing room where he took questions for about an hour. As for his address, he started off with an apology, saying that he has come up short in making citizens' lives better. A bit less than half of the address was about his past 2 years as president, and the rest was spent on his vision for the next 3 years. Above all, as the ruling People Power Party had lost the recent general election, he said he will try his best to work with the opposition-led National Assembly. Take a listen.
국민 여러분, 정부가 민생을 위해 일을 더 잘하려면 국회의 협력이 반드시 필요합니다. 앞으로 여야 정당과 소통을 늘리고 민생 분야 협업도 더욱 강화하겠습니다. 국회에도 당부 말씀을 드립니다. 정쟁을 멈추고 민생을 위해 정부와 여야가 함께 일하라는 것이 민심이라고 생각합니다.
Now, Do-yeon, so in his plan for the next 3 years, he announced a new ministry to tackle the low birth rate. What can you tell us about that?
That's right, Tommy. If there was one aspect to his message that was completely new, this is it. He said a new ministry will be created to respond to current low birth rate, and it seems like it will be given a significant amount of power. Take a listen.
저출생 대응기획부 장관이 사회부총리를 맡도록 해서 교육, 노동, 복지를 아우르는 정책을 수립하고 단순히 복지정책 차원을 넘어 국가 아젠다가 되도록 하겠습니다.
Currently, the Deputy Prime Minister for Social Affairs is the Education Minister, and to have this new ministry led by the Deputy Prime Minister is putting a lot of responsibility on the new role. This will certainly need support from the National Assembly to change the government organization, so it'll be interesting to see how the government comes up with a draft and how the opposition-led floor will see this happen. For reference, the government is expecting the fertility rate to fall below 0.7 by this year, the lowest in the OECD, so it's an urgent situation.
Indeed. Now, what else stood out during the address, and what can you tell us about the Q&A session that followed?
Tommy, he said he will open an era of the middle and working classes, vowing to focus on policies that will help them economically and socially. He also reiterated the economy is showing positive signs, referring to the OECD raising the nation's economic growth rate for 2024 to 2.6%. Also, he spoke of his diplomatic efforts working as the nation's #1 salesman. As for the Q&A session, the first question started off with sensitive issues such as what he thought about the general election laws and the investigation surrounding the First Lady Kim Gun-hee's acceptance of a luxury bag. He apologized for her, quote, unwise actions. And as for the investigation behind government interference of a young Marine last year, he said, if the results are not sufficient, he will call for a special probe himself. We will have more about the press conference in the later newscast, but for now, back to you, Tommy.
All right, Do-yeon, thank you for that report. Now, on the trade front, the country's current account remained in positive territory once again in March, to post a rebound in the first quarter of the year from last year's negative figures. Our Moon Hae-ryun has the details.
South Korea's trade balance logged a surplus once again as chip exports showed a robust recovery and energy prices fell. Preliminary data released by the Bank of Korea on Thursday show that the country's current account balance came to $6.93 billion in March. This is the 11th month in a row for the account to be in the black, following a surplus of just over $6.8 billion in February. With this latest data, the current account balance in the first quarter of the year recorded $16.84 billion in total, a notable rebound from the negative figures seen in the first quarter of 2023. The goods account tracking imports and exports experienced a surplus for a year as semiconductor exports jumped by over 34% compared to the same month last year.
Goods exports centered around chips and IT products rose for 6 straight months, while goods imports with raw materials such as oil, gas and coal continued to decline.
Data also show that outbound shipments of electronic goods increased by around 21% year-on-year, while exports of chemical goods dropped by over 11%. Another key reason the goods account maintained a surplus was lower import cost of raw materials due to falling energy prices. The value of gas imports, for one, fell by nearly 38% on year, and the value of coal imports dropped by more than 40%. This led to an overall decline of imports by 13.1% compared to March last year. However, the services balance, which includes earnings and spending on overseas trips and transport, was in the red by $2.43 billion. The travel sector in particular recorded a deficit of $1.07 billion, but that's lower than the previous month's tally, which the BOK explained as more overseas travelers visiting the country. Meanwhile, the primary account balance responsible for monitoring foreign workers' wages and overseas dividend payments reported a surplus of $1.83 billion. 문혜련, Arirang News.
South Korea's household debt-to-GDP ratio in the first quarter came to under 100% for the first time in 3.5 years. According to a report released by the Institute of International Finance on Thursday, the ratio was 98.9%. The fall was reportedly due to 3 years of monetary tightening since the latter half of 2021, after household debt saw an increase during COVID-19. Still, the country ranked number 1 in terms of household debt relative to GDP among 34 countries included in the report. Now, corporate debt was also 1.2 times larger than GDP in the first quarter. Regarding the prolonged medical dispute, to cope with a possible shortage of new doctors next year, the government plans to allow foreign licensed doctors to provide medical services in Korea. The medical community reacted to this with strong criticism. Choi Soo-young has the details.
The medical dispute in South Korea is reaching a crisis point. The Health Ministry announced on Wednesday that it plans to allow doctors with foreign licenses to provide medical services here. But this will be limited to when the healthcare alert level reaches serious as it is now due to the walkout. The ministry gave official notice of a revision to the medical law, stating this was to address the shortage of doctors that is creating a healthcare gap. The ministry will accept opinions on the revision up until May 20th, while an exact implementation date has yet to be determined. However, the Korean Medical Association, the country's largest doctors group, criticized the decision right after the official notice, alleging it would bring about a huge decline in the quality of medical services. Meanwhile, the academic board at Busan National University, 320 kilometers south of Seoul in Busan, and Jeju National University decided not to revise their internal regulations on increasing their medical school quota. The board said that, as there was no social consensus regarding the increase, they would keep the number of new students at the current levels. The Education Ministry expressed regret over this, as the majority of university medical schools had already completed changes to their regulations.
While other universities have either completed or are smoothly progressing with a revision of their regulations, the ministry regrets the situation at Busan National University. The Education Ministry urges the university to complete the regulatory revision process, following its demand for an increase in medical school enrollment.
The ministry warned that if the university fails to revise its regulations, it could face a suspension from medical school admissions in 2025. The medical crisis is growing as the collective walkout by trainee doctors to protest the government's plan to increase the number of new medical students has lasted for almost 3 months. The medical authorities are concerned that there will be a shortage of new specialists next year, as junior trainee doctors won't be able to finish their training and take specialist exams the following year if they are absent for more than 3 months. The authorities said around May 20th is the deadline for these doctors to return to their hospitals. Cheong, Arirang News.
South Korea has been working with Indonesia to jointly develop the KF-21 fighter jet by 2026. But with Indonesia not being able to make financial contributions on time, South Korea hinted at accepting Indonesia's recent offer to significantly reduce its share of the payment. Our defense correspondent Choi Min-jung reports.
South Korea seems likely to accept Indonesia's recent proposal to cut back its financial contributions to the joint KF-21 fighter jet development project. The two countries had agreed to jointly develop the KF-21 from 2015 to 2026, with the South Korean government covering 60%, the manufacturer Korea Aerospace Industries contributing 20%, and Indonesia contributing another 20%. The expected total amount in investment was approximately 8.1 trillion won. However, Indonesia has offered to cut its payment to about a third of the original amount. This means instead of 1.6 trillion won or $1.2 billion due by 2026, the Indonesian government would only pay about 600 billion won.
We are reviewing measures in line with our national interests, considering the timely development of the KF-21 fighter jet, the impact on defense resources, and defense industry exports.
The Defense Acquisition Program Administration explained that the offer would be accepted under the condition of providing Jakarta with fewer technology transfers. If the proposal is approved, South Korea will need to secure an additional 1 trillion won or $732 million. However, the agency said the amount has been reduced by half through cost reductions that were made during the development process. The decision is set to be finalized in late May to prevent any delays in the jet's development project. Indonesia's commitment to the project has long been questioned as it missed payment deadlines, contributing just around 300 billion won so far. The proposal comes amid an ongoing probe into alleged attempts by Indonesian engineers to steal the jet's technology from Korea Aerospace Industries. Choi Min-jung, Arirang News.
U.S. President Joe Biden made it clear on Wednesday that no offensive U.S. weapons, which he acknowledged could be used against civilians in Gaza, will be provided to Israel. Shin Se-byuk has the details.
U.S. President Joe Biden said the U.S. would not supply weapons to Israel, which it could use to attack Rafah. In an interview on Wednesday, Biden said that while Washington is still committed to Israel's defense, his administration was not going to supply weapons and artillery shells that would be used in Rafah. The move is a clear statement against Israel's recent ground operation in the southernmost city in the Gaza Strip. U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin, speaking before the Senate Appropriations Committee the same day, confirmed the temporary halt of the weapons shipments.
As we have assessed the situation, we paused one shipment of high payload munitions.
He stressed that Israel should not launch major attacks in Rafah without ensuring the protection and safety of civilians in the conflict zone. Secretary Austin also noted that a final decision on whether to proceed with the shipments has not yet been made. The weapons were reported to include 1,800 2,000-pound bombs and 1,700 500-pound bombs. This confirmation by a senior U.S. government official follows several reports of the temporary suspension amid disagreements over Israel's actions in Rafah and marks its first public acknowledgement of the decision. State Department spokesman Matthew Miller, in a briefing on Wednesday, also acknowledged the suspension in response to Washington's concerns of a major operation in Rafah by the Israeli military.
And we also have concerns about the impact of any potential operation on the delivery of humanitarian assistance. So we have paused one shipment of near-term assistance, and we are reviewing others.
The Biden administration's decision has reportedly prompted Israel to warn that it could endanger talks on hostage deals. According to U.S. media outlet Axios on Wednesday, senior Israeli officials have expressed deep frustration and dissatisfaction with the White House decision to delay the weapons shipments. Reports also suggest that Israel is outraged not only by the halt of the shipments, but also by the leak of disinformation to the press. Israel has also cautioned the U.S. that this decision might jeopardize efforts to negotiate a ceasefire and secure the release of the hostages. Shin Se-byuk, Arirang News.
Russia on Wednesday conducted large-scale strikes in Ukraine just a day before its Victory Day. Meanwhile, EU envoys have agreed to use windfall profits from Russian central bank assets frozen in the bloc for Ukraine's defense. Lee Seung-jae has more.
A day before Russia's Victory Day, celebrating the Soviet Union's victory over Nazi Germany in 1945, its military conducted its largest attack in weeks against Ukraine. The Russian military carried out massive attacks on Ukraine's energy infrastructure on Wednesday, using 55 missiles and 21 drones launched from either Russia or Russian-controlled areas. The attacks targeted power generation and transmission facilities in 6 regions of Ukraine. The overnight attacks resulted in at least 3 civilian casualties, as Russia's military continues its recent attempts to paralyze Ukraine's energy system. Meanwhile, ambassadors of EU member nations on Wednesday agreed to use windfall profits from Russian central bank assets frozen in the bloc to further aid Ukraine's defense. According to Reuters, citing EU diplomatic sources, the bloc will use some $300 billion of Russian financial assets that the G7 countries froze in 2022 over Moscow's invasion of Ukraine. Upon approval of its legal text, 90% of the proceeds will go into an EU-run fund for military aid for Ukraine, while the other 10% will support the war-torn country in other ways. The decision comes despite Russian officials last month threatening the West with a severe response and endless legal challenges if the frozen assets are touched. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
North Korean leader Kim Jong-un has sent a congratulatory message to Russian President Vladimir Putin for the 79th anniversary of Russia's Victory Day. North Korea's official newspaper, the Nodongshimun, reported on Thursday that Kim expressed his firm support and solidarity for Moscow, saying the Russian people are protecting their country's sovereign rights under Putin's leadership. Victory Day celebrates the Soviet Union's victory over Nazi Germany during World War II. The North's leader also sent a message to Putin on Tuesday to congratulate the Russian leader on the start of his 5th term. Following the Biden administration's order to investigate whether connected vehicles imported from China pose a national threat, the U.S. Commerce Department now warns that it could issue a ban on the use of Chinese technology in certain smart cars. Yoon reports.
On Wednesday, U.S. Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo issued a warning that the U.S. could potentially ban the use of Chinese technology in connected cars, which are smart cars linked to surrounding networks. Raimondo cited security threats, as the technology requires the collection of large amounts of data of not only personal users, but also information on U.S. infrastructure. She said that the most extreme action would be to completely ban Chinese connected vehicles in the United States, but there could be mitigation, including implementing safeguards or new tariffs. Without detailing a timeline, she said that the department needs to digest all the data before making a decision. In February, the Biden administration ordered a probe into electric vehicles made in China to investigate whether imported connected vehicles pose a national security threat, naming 6 countries, including China, as foreign entities of concern. The Commerce Department responsible for conducting the investigation said it would review public comments that were due by April 30th. According to the U.S. Department of Commerce's Federal Register, the South Korean government filed a letter of opinion on April 30th. The letter requested a more precise definition of connected cars, saying that the current definition was too broad. The statement also said that the uncertainties of the potential regulatory policies and timing of its implementation could lead to significant burdens on the industry. The Alliance for Automotive Innovation, a trade group representing most major automakers around the world, also submitted a letter on April 30th, saying that while the automakers are committed to appropriately minimizing risks related to Chinese design systems, it would be very difficult to find new suppliers for their existing hardware and software components. 이은진, Arirang News.
Los Angeles Dodgers baseball superstar Shohei Ohtani's former interpreter agreed to plead guilty on Wednesday to illegally transferring around $17 million from Ohtani's accounts. According to the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Central District of California, 39 years old Ipei Mitsuhara agreed to plead guilty to one charge of bank fraud, which carries up to 30 years in prison, and one charge of filing a false tax return. The authorities emphasized the enormity of the defendant's offense, stating that he exploited his trusted position to take advantage of the player to cover his gambling debts.
Let's take a look at the latest news in the world now. In France, the Olympic flame arrived on French soil on Wednesday, 79 days before the Paris 2024 Olympic Games opening ceremony. The Olympic flame safely reached the French port city of Marseille after a 12-day journey from Greece on board the Bellum, a 128-year-old three-masted ship. French swimmer Florent Manadou, who won gold in the 2012 Olympic men's 50 meters freestyle, was given the honor of being the first torchbearer on French soil. Manadou then handed over the torch to Paralympic athlete Nantenon Keita, a 400 meters gold medalist at the 2016 Rio Games. Marseille-born rapper Jules then lit the cauldron in front of around 150,000 people, signaling the start of the Olympic torch relay celebrations, which will continue until the start of Paris Olympic Games on the 26th of July. A Boeing 767 cargo airplane landed at Istanbul airport on Wednesday without its front landing gear, dragging its nose on the tarmac. The Turkish Transport Ministry said authorities have launched an investigation while no casualties were reported. The FedEx Airlines cargo plane was doused with firefighting foam as it came to a halt on the runway after sparks and smoke were seen from the nose of the plane dragging on the tarmac. The plane flew in from Paris and reportedly informed Istanbul Airport's control tower that its front landing gear had failed to open. The Turkish Transport Ministry said in a statement that the cargo aircraft landed with guidance from the control tower. FedEx said they would provide additional information as it is available. The aircraft in the incident was less than 10 years old. In South Africa, rescue teams in the coastal city of George continued their search on Wednesday for some 40 construction workers missing after an apartment building under construction collapsed on Monday. According to the George municipality, of the 75 construction workers on site, 7 workers have been confirmed dead, while 16 of the 29 rescued from under the collapsed debris are in critical condition. 39 workers remained unaccounted for as of Wednesday morning, buried in the rubble of the 5-story building. More than 200 rescue personnel from disaster response teams from nearby cities and towns have been brought in to help the rescue efforts. Authorities have announced an investigation into the collapse. The Garrick Club, London's historic private members club, voted to allow women to join for the first time since it was founded in 1831. Members of the all-male gentlemen's club reportedly voted on Tuesday on whether to allow women to join, and almost 60% of those present were in favor of doing so. The Garrick has caught the public's attention as its members are all prominent figures in society, including King Charles III, senior politicians, judges, journalists and actors. Previously, in 2015, a vote was held to consider the acceptance of female members, but it was rejected at the time. Women were only allowed to enter the club as guests and were denied full membership. Kim Seong, Arirang News.
Good afternoon. While temperature swings continue today in most places, certain parts of the country had single-digit morning temperatures, but highs are rising rapidly to the 20s, going up 1 to 9 degrees higher than yesterday. And those in Gyeongju could notice gaps of about 20 degrees Celsius today. Sunny skies expected nationwide with stronger UV rays for southern regions in Jeju Island. Have your sunglasses and a hat ready to protect yourself from the strong UV rays. The capital area should be as mild as yesterday at 21 degrees. Daejeon, Chuncheon, Gwangju will see a high of 23 degrees Celsius. Again, there's a big rise in highs for southern regions at 22 degrees in Busan. Air quality will be decent nationwide. Then pleasant late spring weather is expected for Friday, but nationwide rain is in the forecast for this weekend. But sunny and warm weather is in store for next week as the roses start to bloom. With that in mind, let's take a look at the international weather conditions.
That's all we have at this hour. Arirang News will be back at 2 p.m. Korea time. Thanks for watching.